Amid an ongoing crime wave, public safety in the Bayou City enduring a genuine decline. As murders rise, accountability falls. A jail in crisis, court dockets clogged, and a local judiciary prioritizing the rights of criminals over the well-being of innocent victims. With a community sense of security in freefall, an unprecedented number of citizens are arming themselves against the threat. With the rule of law under assault, what can be done to turn the tide? I'm Greg Groogan, and welcome to a special public safety edition of What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, well-known businessman and columnist Bill King. Next up, Houston attorney and former police officer Charles Adams. In the three spot, longtime journalist and social worker at the Houston Area Women's Center, Chow Win. Batting cleanup, former Houston City Council member Sue Lovell. And closing us out, Charles Blaine, founder of Urban Reform. Let's begin. The goal of any community, any society for that matter, should be elevating the safety of its members each and every day without infringing unnecessarily on fundamental freedoms. Alarmingly, in our community, Greater Houston, there is a pervasive belief that public safety has been steadily, destructively eroding. The natural consequence is a growing level of collective fear, justified by hard facts. In the space of 2 years' time, the murder rate in Houston has increased more than 70%. Property crime has exploded to twice the national average. Hobbled by the pandemic, the dockets of our criminal courts are clogged with a 2-year backlog, an estimated 60,000 felony cases, with more added daily. And then there's the horrific Harris County Jail, where nearly 7,000 maximum security inmates with demonstrably violent criminal histories have wreaked absolute havoc, beating, maiming, and yes, raping the overworked, underprotected detention staff. Finally, the thin blue line of law enforcement, thoroughly frustrated by progressive judges who have granted bond to literally thousands of captured criminals, who in turn routinely use their freedom to claim more victims. Panel, is it hyperbole to suggest that as a city we stand at a perilous crossroads? I'm going to start with you, Bill King.
Well, there's no doubt that we have a public safety crisis going on in Houston, but frankly, it's going on all over the country right now. I think we've got decades of bad public policy here. The whole war on drugs was a terrible idea, and I think in many ways it's corrupted our law enforcement system. The cash bail system was problematic, and so you have now a overreaction to that, and we've gone from lock them all up to let them all loose. And we just can't seem to get this public policy right. We need to concentrate on violent crime. That's what people really care about, serious property crimes, and get the police officers out of everything else. And we need to have a fair criminal justice system. And we've got to make all of those things happen. But this is not just Houston. I want to emphasize that we have 12 cities in the country just last week broke their all-time murder records.
All right, Charles Adams, I am eager to hear your reality check.
Well, we have as Bill alluded to, we have a paradigmatic issue with law enforcement that isn't in a steady decline. We've been defining crime wrong for decades. We have had not just an erosion, but a steep decline in public safety in the last 2 years. And a lot of that is policy driven, from San Francisco to New York, which are the line leaders of we have quality of life crimes. Let's not police these small victim crimes in an effort to focus on other issues. But the issue there is something that a politician in Ivory Tower sees as a small victim crime can be crippling for someone on the edge of poverty. And crime is almost always socioeconomically and racially homogenous. White people kill white people, black people kill black people, poor people rob from poor people. And by non-policing victim crime, we are abandoning poor people of color who have been suffering from the over-policing on the war on drugs. Prohibition is a horrible idea. We need to end it. Drugs can destroy lives, but the war on drugs has destroyed the police relationship with many, many communities of color. Citation revenue, that's taxation through citation, is a regressive tax that also focuses on people of color and the poor. We need to get prohibition and revenue out of the police business, and police should only be focused on suppressing and solving victim crime. Here in Houston, the response times are horrible, and I don't blame the rank and file officers. We need a paradigmatic shift in how we police this city and this country.
Charles Blaine, as an urban reformer, you have taken a deep dive on this issue. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, well, to answer your question about if we're at a crossroads, I certainly think so. I mean, the city itself started to see its population stagnate and even decrease a bit before the pandemic. Then you add the pandemic into it, and you see a lot of cities see their population declining as people are moving out of them. Then you look at Houston's poor infrastructure, school system that's mired in controversy, nonstop flooding, increased housing costs. It all forces people to continue to move out. And then you add crime on top of it. And Dallas just last week, was reporting an 8.5% decrease in overall violent crime this past year. And so if you're looking at, if you're trying to move to Texas or looking for a place to move in the state of Texas, and you're comparing Houston to Dallas, and Dallas is reporting, whether that's accurate or not, an 8.5% decrease in overall violent crime and not these other issues that the city of Houston has, then you might be inclined to move there. So I think for the overall health of the city, the region, and the state, seeing as we are the biggest city in the state, it's obviously a problem that we need to get a handle on really soon.
Chell, when you come at this issue from the perspective of victims, what can you tell us?
We are facing a crossroads. These are really hard times, and we're all paying the price. We know that after big disasters like Hurricane Katrina, and now we've got a COVID, that crime spikes, right? So this is what we're seeing, and lest us forget, those are the things we've recovered from. I'd like to be a little more optimistic that this city has weathered some pretty bad crime waves, that we can get through this. But I agree with Charles. We haven't looked at the root causes of what's going on. Why are we addressing poverty? And we just had this big racial reckoning, and we're still not there. The city of Austin just last week announced that they were reappropriating some funds to a domestic violence shelter so that the domestic violence organization can run shelters for the city, taking money away from the police department, saying we're going to allocate $20 million. Those are the things that we were looking at the precipice of the Derek Chauvin, the crimes there. We're not still looking at those things. Relational policing, like Charles and William were talking about. So yeah, we've got a lot to pay. We're all paying the price for this serious crime wave that we're seeing in our Houston city and cities across the country.
Sue Lovell, final minute goes to you.
Well, what I hear is people expect the police will respond when there's a shooting and a murder and something horrific. Where true frustration is about when the crime happens at my home, in my community, in my neighborhood, no one shows up. And I think that if we could get to a point where the law enforcement could get together and kind of coordinate this. We have wonderful constables on the ground in the neighborhoods that know what's going on. And let's say that's what they take care of. HPD, they take care of the violent crime and the other crime that's going on. I see no coordination really between all our law enforcement. And ultimately, people in neighborhoods feel like something happens at their house, nobody cares, nobody comes.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Still ahead, the ongoing collateral human damage caused by thousands of dangerous criminals breaking bond. But up next, we continue our discussion of Harris County's growing sense of insecurity and what, if anything, can be done to reverse rising crime. Welcome back. For months, Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo has publicly blamed the pandemic for sparking our local epidemic of crime, further suggesting that the suffering we've experienced here is being matched in major cities across the country. Panel, do you believe there is merit in that claim? I'm going to start with you, Charles Adams.
Well, I mean, I think COVID has impacted America in a variety of ways, but I think Judge Hidalgo in her inexperience, is looking to blame anyone but her failure to fully fund the needs of the Harris County criminal justice system, and her ongoing war coordinated with Adrian Garcia against, as Sue mentioned, the very important, very localized constable patrols. If Judge Hidalgo had her way, they would be completely eliminated. If you'll remember, original argument on that was that constable patrols were basically racist. They were racially and economically biased because of the system of neighborhoods paying extra on top of their taxes to have a neighborhood deputy. And of course, that's not true. Of course, our suburbia in Houston is the most racially diverse suburban area in America and one in the world, right? And that was just an argument trotting out these nonsense arguments. It's all about consolidation of power because that's what Adrian Garcia wants. And it's not a focus on public safety. And Judge Hidalgo needs to drop the nonsense and say, now is the time. I don't care what is going on, to, instead of virtue signaling and talking about pet projects, to fully fund law enforcement while also requiring law enforcement actual reforms. But we don't hear that. We just hear nonsense. We're going to hear continued nonsense. And it's my hope that there is an electoral consequence for her horrible inadequacies in the criminal justice space.
Charles Blaine, are you buying what the county judge is saying, that the lion's share of the increased crime is due to the pandemic?
No, I mean, and I think when you look at the pandemic, it has given a lot of city and county officials across this country an escape route, whether it's, budgetary concerns, well, they got a lot of money from the federal government for the pandemic, whether it's crime increasing, well, they can blame the pandemic. So I think it's given them the ability to shift blame away from them. But we saw it going up, and we see it going up across the country. And they tried to primary Kim Ogg because she wasn't reform-minded enough. And so it's this idea, this mentality that they had when they came in with what they wanted to do and refusing to listen to folks who tried to give expertise and insight into how to solve the issues. They had their agenda set forth, and that's what they wanted to push forward on. And that's what we continue to see. And so I think it's kind of the pendulum swinging back and forth, but I certainly don't blame it on COVID. I don't think that's the reason that we're dealing with the increased crime. Maybe a small part of it, but certainly not the bulk of it.
We're going to have to leave it there. Up next, locked and loaded, Texans fearful of crime are buying guns at an unprecedented rate. Will more people packing heat make society safer or more perilous? Welcome back. During the past 2 years of pandemic and coinciding crime wave, people in our country have purchased no fewer than 40 million firearms, with women and African Americans doing a disproportionate amount of the first-time buying. With the right to self-protection anywhere, anytime as their battle cry, Republicans in Austin pushed through an unrestricted carry law. Democrats, of course, are claiming that measure has actually made the Lone Star State less safe and potentially a far more dangerous place. Panel, most of you are old enough to remember the Cold War concept of mutually assured destruction. That is, if everyone, including criminals, assumes everyone else is armed, nobody pulls their gun. Now, given the current state of public safety, do you see that as a legitimate cautionary position? Chalwin, I know you have strong feelings on this issue. I'm going to start with you.
Well, if you're watching the news every night, you know that's not happening. The guns that are out in the streets and the crime that's being committed are by the bad guys hurting the good guys. So no, I don't think that theory works. What I can say is, look, guns are about responsible gun ownership. We're not going to do away with the Second Amendment. We're very concerned as a women's-led organization that works with survivors and perpetrators that guns are almost always used in homicides with intimate partner violence. We're very concerned. But responsible gun ownership and this whole open carry concept. Look, now you can just buy a gun and just put it in your bag, right, without knowing what the laws are, what safe gun usage is. I just had a conversation with some girlfriends of mine who, aren't real gun owners, but have decided to take that into their own hands to protect themselves. And that's called risk reduction, right? We're trying to reduce our risk of getting hurt. But if you're going to carry a gun, have some responsible gun ownership. Go take a class. You don't have to carry a permit right now, but you certainly need to know how to use one.
Bill King, I know you put some thought into this. Is this dangerous, the explosion in gun purchases? I mean, 40 million in 2 years and not slowing down.
You know, there's about 20 states that have permitless carry, and I don't see much correlation between any sort of crime or gun incidents in the states that have it and don't have it. This is mostly a partisan talking point for the Democrats and Republicans to talk to their bases. Like I grew up shooting guns. I own a bunch of guns, but I don't carry one around just because I don't think it's a safe thing to do. I think that guns for most people are the illusion of safety other than actual real safety. If you were accosted by a criminal, the odds that you're going to have your gun handy and be able to get it out and do something to protect yourself is really pretty low. But I understand why people do it. I mean, there's a lot of very fancy women I know are carrying around handguns today and weren't doing it a year ago because they don't feel safe. And so I think the real answer to this is we got to figure out how to make our streets safe so that people don't feel like they need to do this.
All right, Sue, jump in here.
Well, yeah, you know, look, if you're gonna go and purchase a gun, then do the right thing, like you would anything else, and go take a class and go learn how to operate it properly. And then really think through, will I be able to shoot another person if I have to in a situation? Could I do that? And if you can't, then don't carry the gun around, because the purpose is to stop somebody from harming you. You get a situation where they pull a gun, you pull a gun, and you can't do the act. You're far better off not pulling that gun. So go and get instruction, think it through really, really hard. Would you be able to shoot another person and be responsible about it before you decide to carry one?
Charles Adams, you know, the lion's share of the police officer groups lobbying in Austin were opposed to unrestricted carry. I'm curious to hear what you think.
Now, I am against open carry. When I was an officer, we had to have a visible badge to open carry because it's intimidating to people. I think it's men that are poorly endowed that want to scare other people around them. I think it's a bad idea. Now, I also agree with Sue on train. You have to train with firearms as if you're going to use them when they're needed. However, I am a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment, period. And I think a lot of this dangerous rhetoric about taking guns away from law-abiding citizens is bad. And I'll tell you why. In 1979, there was a man called the Baseball Bandit who would stalk single mothers and rape their children all over East Houston. When my wife was 5 years old, he broke into my wife's house with the intent of raping her. She had to testify twice to send him to prison at 6 and 7 years old. And those are scars that linger. But if my little 5'2", 100-pound mother-in-law didn't have a gun and shoot him over and over and over again, we don't know what would have happened, right? So you're not going to hear, I don't buy into this nonsense about women can't protect themselves with guns, or we need to strip guns away from citizens that want to protect themselves, especially when we have law enforcement that doesn't respond to so many citizens' needs right now. We need guns. We need law-abiding citizens need to have access, and the Second Amendment guarantees it.
Leaving it there. When we come back, shoplifting, larceny, burglary, and theft. These days in Houston, Texas, the 8th commandment is being widely ignored. We're going to talk about why on the other side of this break. While murder and acts of violence lead newscasts and grab headlines, it is the onslaught of so-called property crimes which have chipped away at both our bank accounts and our collective sense of security. While images of the brazen smash-and-grab robberies inflicted on San Francisco shocked the nation, we here in Houston continued to endure debilitating levels of robbery, theft, and shoplifting with very little accountability for those doing the stealing. Panel, if it continues unabated, what do you see as the ramifications long term? I'm going to start with you, Charles Blaine.
I mean, I think the ramifications long term are what we talked about earlier in the show, is that people start to leave and they go elsewhere. And I saw this week, San Francisco, people were leaving their trunks open so that people didn't bust their windows, and they had to pay to get their windows replaced. So if you wanted to steal something, you could just go through their back seat, see there's nothing there, take what you need, whatever the case is, and not have to actually do any damage. I mean, that's pathetic. That's like a great sign of societal breakdown, degradation, if that's what we're doing now. But I think you're going to start to see people move. People are going to move to places like Sugar Land and the Woodlands and other places that are safe, that have a better standard of living for a little more cost of living, but at least you have the reassurance there that these issues aren't going to follow you as much as they're going to follow you here in the city of Houston or in other major cities.
Sue Lovell, you've been on the receiving call from your constituents when you were on council of petty crime and robbery. I mean, does it have a degrading effect?
Sure it does, absolutely. And look, I think it happens in those other areas in the suburbs. It's just that they feel like out there they get a little bit more response from their police department than they do here. Again, I think people here think petty crime and those kind of crime is not a priority to HPD. And so they're not going to show up. Nobody's going to do anything. And, you know, when you feel like your police don't care and they aren't going to come. But look, I was on the receiving end at my own home with a robbery, where they came in and shot my son 4 times. His girlfriend, who was pregnant with my granddaughter twice. And, you know, they still haven't found the people that did that and the type of work that was done. People want their police to respond, no matter if it's something stolen off the porch or somebody's come to their house and shot them. And I think people here just don't feel like that it is a priority and a response. And HPD needs to seriously look at this and reprioritize how they're going to do policing in this city. You know, in elections, we have elections coming up. Elections count.
All right, Bill King. You and I have talked about the concept of redlining. And is there a sense that Houston, by some developers, by some corporate entities, could be redlined if it doesn't get its crime under control?
Well, look, the value proposition of living in cities is declining every day and has been for a number of years. I think 9 out of the 10 largest cities in the United States lost population or stayed flat over the last 5 years. And that's because there's just not a good reason to live here compared to living out in the suburb. Greg, you and I were talking about, I was talking to the guy that runs a large real estate investment trust in the United States, and they absolutely will not invest in Harris County at all. Now, it's not just crime, because that's a problem every place, but you add to that flooding, you add to that an industry that's in decline, and there's a lot of reasons not to live in Houston. But this is happening all over the country in every city. I've been doing some development up in Central Texas of land, and we can't get a project finished before it sells out because people want out of the cities. And I tell you, surprisingly, they want out of the suburbs too. I mean, it's better in the suburbs than it is in the inner city, but not by a whole bunch. I mean, you've really got to get out to the ex-burbs and to the rural areas for it to make a big difference.
We're going to leave it right there. Up next, the serial unleashing of bona fide predators on little or no bond. The impact of our catch and release criminal justice system is on the table when we return. Welcome back. Here in Harris County, no fewer than 113 defendants charged with capital murder have been inexplicably granted bond and released back onto our streets pending trial. Let me repeat, we are talking capital murder, the most egregious offense in the criminal code, a conviction for which carries either life imprisonment or the death penalty. In all, more than 50,000 accused felons have benefited from the catch and release philosophy of criminal justice perpetrated by the current crop of Democratic reform judges. Now, according to Crime Stoppers Houston, 155 people have lost their lives at the hands of accused criminals cut loose from custody only to kill while on bond. Panel, if it weren't our absolute reality, I'd call it a frightening parallel universe. Chow Win, jump in here.
Well, I can't help but think of the families that we work with at the Houston Area Women's Center. These are families of survivors. Just reading the news this morning, there was a Houston police officer out on $90,000 bond for victimizing and terrorizing his ex-girlfriend. $90,000, $9,000 from the bail bondsman. That's what we're not talking about. I think the real winners here are the bail bondsmen who are able to do this. We've got a criminal justice system and legislation that doesn't work when it comes to bond. And we've got a lot of big issues. We're letting criminals back on the streets to perpetrate, to terrorize other victims. We've got a real problem here.
All right, Charles Adams, when we have kind of this revolving door, I would think that law enforcement officers feel like they're just running interference between, these criminals and the public that feed upon, that they endanger. What's your take on this?
I mean, I'm sure it can be discouraging, or when they call intake and they don't have charges accepted on a victim crime, but they're public servants, and if they want to get paid and do the job, they need to be expected to do the job. In Harris County, we had Republican judges for years that would set bonds without consideration about people's ability to pay on things like driving while licensed invalid in misdemeanor courts, or user amounts of drugs in felony courts. So defendants would just sit there and have to take a plea to get out. That's wrong. It's a pendulum, right? And you do have an expanded right to bail in Texas under our Constitution compared to the federal. But then the pendulum swung the other way. And now you have these Democratic judges who, instead of looking at the necessary jurisprudential three-pronged test, which is ability to pay, that's one, but then you have likelihood of return and the safety of the victim in the community. And that third prong has been absolutely forgotten. So before, in the past, where you had people that shouldn't be in jail, rotting in jail, and we needed reform, well, we got too much reform. And now we have judges that are just turning the wheel. Family violence, even as a misdemeanor, there needs to be more consideration other than just whether or not they can pay PR bond them. And COVID has created a host of other issues. But ultimately, it comes down to Judge Hidalgo not funding the DA's office, Judge Hidalgo not funding the jail, Judge Hidalgo making decisions that sound better to movements as opposed to citizens. You know, Bill said there's no reason to live in Houston. I love Houston. I love this area. I love walking around this city. I love everything about this city. But we got to get more focused, and bail reform is a first step.
All right, Sue Lovell, I don't think I can disagree with anything that Charles Adams just said. What's your take?
I love Houston. I came here to build my life. I want to fight for Houston because I helped build that Houston, and that's what Houstonians need to do. We have elections coming up, and elections matter. There are certain crimes in which, like domestic violence, that when they're caught, it's probably not the first time that they offend. So why don't we look at crimes as if we just don't release you? I'm totally opposed to re-releasing the repeat released who continue to go back out and commit those serious crimes against people. There needs to be a better way of deciding who gets to go back out and analyzing those crimes, who's more likely to go and repeat and who isn't. And those repeat offenders should not ever be back out there. They were given their chance, they blew it. They get to stay in and keep our city safe. But I'm willing to fight for Houston.
All right, Charles, take 30 seconds. Charles Blaine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's two things. The pendulum, like Charles Adams mentioned. I mean, even if you look at our state legislature, the session before this last session, a lot of it was reform focused. They were looking at things from civil asset forfeiture to banning arrests for non-jailable offenses. This most recent session, complete attitude shift. We're looking at things like stricter bail terms from the legislature and looking at, targeting cities that are defunding the police. So the attitude has changed, and I think it's gradually changing even on a more local level. But I think people need to pay attention to who they're electing as judges. Everybody's talking about Abbott versus Beto, but nobody seems to know who their judicial candidates are. Spend some time Googling those folks and what they stand for and what their track record is, rather than spending all the time focused on the top level races, because there's more than enough information out about those.
Bill King, final word to you, about 40 seconds.
Well, I think Charles Adams hit it on the head when he talks about the pendulum swing. We had a very abusive bail system before. They kept a lot of non-violent people in jail just because they couldn't pay. That needed to be reformed. The problem is the pendulum swung absurdly to the other extreme, where now everybody's getting out regardless of what kind of risk they are to society. Hopefully that's going to come back and we're going to end up someplace in the middle, but it needs to happen pretty quick.
Great discussion. Still to come, clogged court dockets and Harris County's dangerously overcrowded jail. How both are compromising public safety. But up next, For the ever-growing list of innocent victims, no voice of support has been more powerful. We're talking one-on-one with Andy Kahn of Houston Crime Stoppers. Welcome back. When it comes to the root cause of violence and lawlessness in Greater Houston, no voice has been more urgent, compelling, and ultimately effective than that of Crime Stoppers victim advocate Andy Kahn. Collaborating with my Fox 26 colleague Randy Wallace in their ongoing Breaking Bond series, Andy has painfully revealed the ongoing human cost of releasing predators.
Because there used to be an adage in Harris County, it was called one bond per customer. You were out on a bond, particularly a felony bond, and you were charged with a new crime, you weren't getting out again. That's not happening anymore, and you're seeing the ramifications of what I call felony bond reform. She got about 113 defendants charged with capital murder out on bond, and some of these are incredibly low bonds for capital murder, the most egregious crime one can be accused of. And sadly, 3 of those are now charged with additional murders. And for a victim advocate like myself, dealing with families who have to undergo the pain, the loss of a loved one to murder, and then you got to turn around and tell them, I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but here's what happened and here's why the system failed you, because this person shouldn't have been out to commit the crime on your loved one. It's absolutely gut-wrenching for families. When you have people that are scared to go out for dinner because they're afraid they're going to be followed home and then shot and killed. We've seen it. When you have people that are scared to go to the bank, we saw that with Martha Medina, who was tracked from a bank and then murdered and killed walking out of McDonald's. When you have people that don't want to go to, let's say, the Galleria because they're fearful of being mugged in a parking lot, that speaks volumes of the psyche that the people in Harris County are undergoing. And we never hear the domino effect that crime has, not just on the citizens, but on the business community as well, from people that are constantly getting broken into and robbed, and very little ramifications for offenders because it's labeled as a property crime and not a violent crime. This upcoming election cycle in 2022, there's only really one issue that's facing Harris County voters. Its crime is number 1, it's number 2, it's number 3, it's number 999.
Still ahead, dangerously overcrowded, chronically understaffed. By all accounts, the Harris County Jail is in the crisis zone. Welcome back. Over the past 2 years, folks in Harris County have borne witness to an undeniable fact. That is, the societal apparatus which delivers an acceptable degree of law and order is a very fragile chain. When one link fails, the resulting impact triggers cascading, potentially catastrophic dysfunction elsewhere. Case in point, the pandemic-driven backlog of criminal cases. Sheriff Ed Gonzalez contends the drastic slowdown has increased the average length of jail incarceration to more than 200 days. That's deeply problematic given that the documented number of violent predatory defendants has risen to 80% of the population inside a dangerously understaffed, overcrowded facility. The murder of a special needs inmate and the horrific rape of a 60-year-old detention officer have finally shaken county leaders into action, albeit both late and probably temporary. Panel, while Lena Hidalgo and her Democratic allies on Commissioner's Court say they are attacking the case backlog by funding the addition of associate judges, District Attorney Kim Ogg's plea for 100 additional prosecutors remains unfilled. I'm going to go to you, Charles Blaine. What's your take on this?
I mean, at this point, it's a game of ego. I think if Lena Hidalgo and Rodney Ellis, who are the two who have really been behind this reform-minded movement over the course of their terms, if they give in to that request, it is signaling that Kim Ogg is correct and that everything that she has been alleging and things that the jail and the Harris County Deputies Organization, all these others have been alleging is correct. And so I think they are reluctant to do so. But at some point, common sense has to prevail. And if you have your top elected law enforcement officials in the county, again, the deputies organization, constables, the public all screaming that they want this and they need this and that there are solutions that can be had to get us out of this problem, then you should start to listen for the better of the county, if not for yourself.
Sue Lovell, take 30 seconds.
Hey, it's your job to think about us, okay? Not some pissing match you're having with some other elected official. Common sense would say you would hire more people that would help, and so they should go ahead and do so. And if they don't want to protect us and do the right thing, get out of the way, let the Justice Department come in and do the right thing. This is about protecting the citizens that elected you.
Charles Adams, you practice law. You heard my fragile chain analogy. Is it valid?
I do think it's valid. Clearly, Lena Hidalgo puts virtue signaling over public safety. But the truth is, you only have so many jury panels available, right? I want Kim to have a fully staffed office and to get these extra 100 prosecutors, because her rank and file prosecutors are doing a tremendous job in pretty awful conditions. But I am a defense attorney. And it is hard to get to trial when you only have X number of jury panels available. You're having to go to the football stadium to pick juries, and the process has been slowed down. This is one specific area where COVID has had its largest impact, and it's why Judge Hidalgo needs to step up and say, hey, I need a fully staffed sheriff's department with a jail that has safety. The deputy that was raped, it just breaks my heart. And we need a fully staffed DA's office. They're right, she's wrong.
Chow, 30 seconds, save some time for Bill.
This is a culture of doing more with less, and it's time to end that culture. What's going on in the jail is seriously egregious when you've got sexual assault of staff happening there, when you've got deputies that are also being targeted. We've got to do more with more, and it's just time to step up and end this charade.
Final word to you, Bill King.
Well, I thought that what was so rich was her saying that it was physically irresponsible to add 50 officers. This is the most profligate spending commissioner's court there's ever been in the history of the county. And they were going to go spend, what was it, $17 million on this BS vaccine contract, but we can't fund prosecutors. I mean, come on, give me a break.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Up next, the push to vastly improve American policing. A year and a half after the killing of George Floyd, has America moved any closer to equal treatment under the law? This year is ending with a guilty plea to federal civil rights charges by Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer responsible for killing George Floyd. He's now set to spend at least 20 years in prison. Well-known attorney and reform activist Lee Merritt called the development significant evidence of a fundamental ongoing national shift toward improved accountability for those in law enforcement. Panel, while progress is on the policing issue was pretty limited at our state legislature this year, Houston was among many cities that embraced a slate of police reforms aimed at rebuilding trust with a skeptical public. Question, is it your sense we as a nation are gradually headed in the right direction? Charles Adams, you've worn the badge. You also defend criminals, or accused criminals. So what's your take here?
My take is that there are many voices, including mine, who have spent 2 decades advocating for fixing our very broken policing system by addressing the war on drugs and citation revenue functions and eliminating them. But really, we've given the pulpit to those that have been demanding abolition of police, abolition of prisons, defunding of police. That who is the media has decided to give that the pedestal. And that's not about fixing police. That's not about reform or accountability. You don't take $150 million away like Austin, Texas did, and then expect policing to be better. If we're going to fix policing, we need to be invested in real reform. And I'm not seeing much of that at all.
Charles Blaine, the rational narrative I hear is not defunding police, but funding better policing. I mean, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the idea since day one. I mean, people like me who look like me who have interactions with the police have always asked for better interactions with the police. But somehow, and I'm just going to go ahead and say it, it has been this kind of like very progressive white liberal perspective that has been taken into consideration, which is defund the police, which is when you look at a lot of cities that have done that, it has been these white progressive cities and mayors and city councils that have pushed that. And even here in Houston, when the idea came up, it was the Black Democratic council members who said, no, that's actually a terrible idea. idea because communities like ours need the police, don't have funding to hire private security, and have higher rates of crime. So they want that. They just want better relationships with them. I think we're heading in somewhat of a better direction. The Ahmaud Arbery case was, positive. The Amber Geiger being convicted of the murder of Botham Jean, positive. We'll see what happens with Kim Potter and Dante Wright, that case. I think we're slowly and gradually heading in the right direction, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Chow, for the folks that you advocate for, are you seeing hope, promise?
Well, look, survivors oftentimes don't call the police because they don't trust it, or their abusers are the breadwinners. They just want the violence to stop. They don't necessarily want the police to come in and ruin their lives, so to speak, right? Their perpetrator goes to jail, then who's going to pay the bills, right? But look, why can't it be a both and? Defund the police is terrible marketing, but there has to be relational policing, going into the communities, establishing trust with those in those communities. And we deal with a lot of clients who are from Black and brown communities, who are in socioeconomic levels that are lower, below the poverty line. I think that the message should be work with the police. Let's do some relational policing. And we didn't see any of the budget being released from the Houston Police Department, but we as an organization, they are important partners for the Houston Area Women's Center. So we just got to relational police better.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Still to come, the national explosion of needless death due to overdose. Has the clear and present danger posed by fentanyl become a weapon of mass destruction? As if the current crime wave wasn't painful enough, America is immersed in an explosion of fatal overdoses caused by the synthetic opiate fentanyl. The number of lives lost to the drug has doubled in just 2 years' time to more than 64,000 and is now believed to be the leading cause of death in American adults aged 18 to 34. The activist group Families Against Fentanyl views this tsunami of ultra-potent narcotics entering the country as an existential threat and has called on our national leaders to declare it a weapon of mass destruction to be countered by American military force. Panel, do you agree or disagree? I'm going to start with you, Sue Lovell. You know this topic well.
Sure I do. Yeah, it is. We're losing a whole generation of people very silently, and it's a very, very wicked addiction. There are now medications that are coming out to help young people get off this addiction because you just can't get off of it cold turkey. But yeah, there needs to be a national strategy and a national discussion about how we save this generation of people from this terrible, terrible addiction.
All right, Bill, you heard that activist group. I mean, are bombing facilities, manufactured facilities in Mexico and China really the answer here? I mean, it's a much more nuanced situation, isn't it?
Look, I think drugs of all description, and I include alcohol and nicotine in that, are one of the great scourges of mankind. I think they've done more damage and destruction than almost anything else has ever done. Having said that, the criminalization of addiction is a dumb idea. And we've tried it now for, 6 decades, and it hasn't worked. Just interdiction and control is not going to do it. We've got to start treating this like a medical problem and not a criminal problem. Otherwise, we are never going to solve this problem.
All right, Charles Adams, I really have like 20 seconds.
Okay, it's naive to think we are going to beat drugs or beat the narco-terrorists with more enforcement activity. We need to legalize marijuana. We need to legalize other drugs and give people access to them, safe ones, not fentanyl or methamphetamine. Tax it and send people to rehab and not jail, period. Our drug policies are just stupid.
Got to leave it there. Thanks for joining us. The conversation continues on a national level next with Fox News Sunday. From all of us here, have a safe and healthy week, and we will see you again next year.